Hello folks, welcome to the new video. So in the last video we discussed about layer 4 load balancing and how it takes place and what are the pros and cons of it and everything. So just a quick refresher. Basically what it would do is, let's say you are sending a request, it will reserve a connection for you with some entity of the backend, and throughout this connection, throughout the whole session, this connection cannot be used by any other connection. So this is sort of a blocker for this device, which is a disadvantage like we discussed, since that may lead to these two, the distribution, workload distribution might not be very uniform, since S1 and S2 might be sitting idle while S3 is doing most of the work. That can be a case. So the load balancing isn't smart like we discussed. And overall, if you want to go into details, of course, if you haven't watched it, you can watch it. I'll link it somewhere here. But for the next video, we'll dive deep into layer 7 load balancer. So let's do layer 7 load balancer. Diagram will be the same, of course. I'll just clear everything out. Okay. So yeah, layer 7 load balancer, how it would take place and how is it different from layer 4 in the first place. So from the name itself, layer 7, you can understand that it's meant to be a bit smarter than layer 4, of course. Since it's on the application layer, it has access to all the data and everything. From the very sound of it, it sounds like it. Since it's above the port, it will have to do layer 7 sort of things, which may be like reading the data, decrypting and stuff. So we can do all sorts of things that we could imagine in the layer 7. So by the sound of it, of course, it's sort of obvious that it's gonna be smarter than layer 4. But also it's gonna be a bit complex, of course. So yeah, layer 7 load balancing and how it would take place. Let's try to understand that. Let's say we are sending segments S1 and S2. Let's say we have established a connection. First of all, TCP connection. So here it won't do the same thing like we did in layer 4 load balancing. It won't reserve a connection. That's not how it works in the first place. So what it would do is it would it has a buffer as in what you can say is it won't send anything that it wouldn't identify. For layer 4 it was just passing a ball. You pass a ball to load balancer, it will pass it through. But layer 7 is smarter. It won't do the same thing. What it would do is it would buffer everything. Let's say you're sending segments S1, S2 and S3, let's say. Okay, so it would buffer everything on its end, and until it identifies what are you trying to send to the server. So it's a bit smarter. It won't let anything, it won't pass anything that it receives. It will first try to identify what sort of thing that you're sending. So it will try to identify, it will store everything in a buffer first of all. It won't pass it directly to the device, because it can be anything, right? You can send anything. So if it won't identify it, it won't send it. Maybe you are sending data in some protocol that it doesn't support, or maybe something like that. So in those cases it won't make it pass through. Let's say some protocol isn't allowed here, or those sort of rules we can implement and everything. So it will store everything in the buffer until and it will try to detect what are you trying to send in the first place. So once it detects something, let's say you are this is a HTTP connection. This is a HTTP request, this is a TCP connection, and you're sending the data, and it identifies that okay, you're trying to make a GET request, which it can allow, maybe, let's say. So what it would do is after that it would pass it through. Let's say it passes it through to S3. After this whole buffering and trying to detect what are you trying to send and everything, it will pass it through after all that processing. So from the very sound of it, you can imagine that it's a bit time consuming, since it needs to do all those work, but at the same time it's smarter than layer 4. Of course, because it won't let anything pass. like tries to detect and everything. So it's smarter, but also it will take more time since it's smarter to do all the things and all what it wants to do here. So these are somewhat obvious characteristics of this as of now. We'll try to like figure more out as we go on the way. So one thing that's good here is you can see it won't reserve the connection. Like it won't reserve the connection like we had in NAT table sort of an implementation in the last video. Like it won't say that any request for this connection has to go to this. That won't be the case. Let's say it's the first request S1 S2 S3 can go to let's say S1 S2 S3 goes to this. Okay, this is the first request, and S1 S2 S3 goes to S1 S2 S3 goes to segments goes to like this x dot x dot x dot 4. And why did I cut it? I should have copied it. But yeah, no issues. So it will be sent here. Let's say now let's say this is done. Now it will process it, it will make the response, it will send it back. That's done. Now let's say in the same connection, see one thing that's important here is in the same connection it makes another request. Try to keep that in mind. Like this connection is already there, but the request is a new one, let's say, and there we have S4, S5 and S6. Same thing, it will store in the buffer first. It will store S4 in the buffer, it will store S5 in the buffer, it will store S6 in the buffer. Like we discussed in the last video, it cannot do like for the same request it cannot send the segments to different devices because it cannot be decrypted. But for the same connection, that need not be the case. It's specific to the request itself. But what layer 4 did was, until this connection is there, it will keep a connection reserved for like the client, and in the whole session of like the connection, or like as much as long like for as long as the connection is alive, no other clients or no other aspects can use the connection between like the load balancer and device. So that was a disadvantage, but here is not that case. Here let's say in the same connection we make another request, let's say so S4 S5 S6, it's possible that it can send it to let's say S1, same thing. So S4 S5 S6 can go to S1. This is something different, if you can notice. Like it wouldn't have been possible until we make a new connection for layer 4 load balancing, but here for the same connection we make like the request can be distributed throughout. So that's a problem. Like it's better with load distribution. Okay, it's better with load distribution and like smarter, than of course it's more secure than anything, because you cannot make any request that you want. Like it will have to it will check and then it will like allow you to pass, unlike layer 4, like which is like passing a ball basically. It's very simple, so it's faster, but it at the same time it's not as smart. If that makes sense. But on the disadvantage side of it, there are some security aspects, because normally let's say you are hosting a server somewhere, load balancer would be some service that you take, let's say some AWS load balancer or some Cloudflare load balancer or whatever. Like let's say you take that service from someone. If you don't have your own load balancer, you'll have to like have your certificates and all stored in the load balancer itself, because it needs to decrypt your data. It needs to see what data is coming, so that it can detect and everything, like we discussed. Even if it's smart, like it cannot let's say you are making a HTTPS, it cannot decrypt and anything. So then if it won't be able to decrypt, it cannot allow the data to pass through. So that might be an issue with the applications that you build, that your load balancer should be able to decrypt your data, which can have 1,000 possibilities. Like if it's like some company can maybe spy on your data and like log them and send them through and sell it and everything. So that's not a very good thing to like with layer 7 load balancer. With layer 4 that's not the case, like we discussed. It just passes the ball, so it need not know like whatever is inside it, so it need not have the decryption and all the features embedded in as well. So like it said, like everything comes at a cost, so that's the cost we have to pay for a smarter load balance sort of thing. And yeah, that's layer 7 load balancer for you guys. So a quick refresher, here like the primary differences from what you can understand on a very basic level is like it's sort of a bit more smarter because it won't have a reserve connection like we have in layer 4. So like the load can be evenly distributed and everything, and you cannot make any kind of request to it. It will allow some specific kind of request to pass which are allowed, so those rules we can embed there. And we can have several functionalities like caching and everything also here, but that's out of the scope for this video. Since it's layer 4, it's under application, right? So we can implement, like let's say caching, we have the buffer already, so those sort of things we can implement here. But yeah, so we can do smarter things in layer 7. But then again, from the security aspect of it, you have to, like, the load balancer should be able to decrypt the application data and everything, so that's like a lot of knowledge for the load balancer. So depending on your use case, that might not be a good thing, of course. But yeah, so yeah, that should be the layer 7 load balancing video for this part, I guess. Of course, like, yeah, I hope I was able to make explain it well. And if you have any doubt or something that you want to ask, you can always ask it in the comments. And if you like my video, of course, you can like, comment, and subscribe, and maybe share it with your friends. And yeah, I hope it was helpful. See you guys. Bye.